Siobhan Heekin-Canedy, and I'm the Regional Director for World Youth Alliance North America. I'm also an Olympian, a figure skater, an ice dancer to be exact. I trained for 17 years so I could skate on Olympic ice in 2014. I won medals, I was Ukrainian national champion 4 times, and top 14 in the world. I'm proud of what I accomplished, and I'm grateful for the opportunities I've been given. But at the end of the day, I know that my value does not lie in being an Olympian. I am a person, unique and unrepeatable, and I have dignity that I can neither earn, nor can it be taken away. And so do you. Today, I don't train 7 hours a day. I don't skate for medals anymore. I just skate because I love it and it's part of who I am. Most of my day is spent spreading the message of human dignity through my work with World Youth Alliance. Sport isn't the only way that dignity manifests itself, but I'd like to think that by sharing my experience as an athlete, I can inspire young people to dream big, to pursue excellence, and to see the dignity in everyone they meet. I'd like to think that when we see dignity in action, we can put dignity into action. I'm American, born and raised in the US. I started skating when I was 5. People always ask me how or when I first knew I wanted to go to the Olympics. And I usually tell them I think most little girls who go ice skating for the first time dream of going to the Olympics someday. But for most of them, it wears off after a few months. And for me, for some reason I can't entirely explain, it didn't. Small basic skills competitions turned into local, regional, and then national competitions. The high intensity of my sport, along with a growth spurt, led to knee injuries. The injury had a silver lining though, because it led me away from freestyle or single skating, which involves a lot of jumps, to ice dancing, which is just as athletically demanding, but more based in a ballroom style of dance, and it involves less impact, so better for my knees. As it turned out, this was my true calling. The switch to ice dancing meant that I needed a partner though, and male ice dancers in the US were few and far between. I ended up skating with a young man from Ukraine. This is how I ended up skating on the Ukrainian Olympic team. While we trained in the US, we traveled often to Ukraine. And in many ways, I think I would say that my journey to World Youth Alliance and my love for international affairs started with this time in Ukraine, and also with my travels all over the world for training and competition. I didn't have the words to describe it then, but I was learning that we are all united by our shared dignity, yet each culture manifests this dignity in a unique way. This fascinated me, and it still does today. In 2014, after 17 years of training, my dream of skating in the Olympics finally came true. That chapter of my life had come to an end. At the age of 22, I knew I wanted to go to college and grad school and ultimately pursue a career in international affairs. It's a good thing I did. I met my husband in college, we're the parents of a beautiful baby girl, and my graduate studies prepared me to take on the role of Regional Director for World Youth Alliance North America. In a way though, I was already preparing for this role while I was training and competing. Since starting in this job, I found myself thinking deeply about the connection between human dignity and sport. I've come to the conclusion that while I was training to be an Olympic athlete, I was also gaining a deeper understanding of human dignity. I think every athlete has the potential to experience this, but I think that everyone, not just the athletically inclined, can benefit from contemplating the relationship between sport and human dignity. So today, I'd like to share some insights with you, drawn from my experience in sport. WYA's certified training program explores the concept of human dignity. The CTP helps us to articulate this idea by drawing on the writings of great thinkers like Charles Malik, Mahatma Gandhi, C.S. Lewis, and so many others. Ultimately, however, these authors are simply expanding on what we already know, or what we should know deep down, that dignity is universal, we all possess it, intrinsic, we have it simply by being human, and inviolable, we can never lose it through our own actions or those of others. In later chapters of the CTP, we talk about the manifestations of dignity: freedom, solidarity, and culture. The distinctly human capacity for freedom, solidarity, and culture helps us to see that all human persons have value. No one can entirely lose these capabilities, and all of us are called to develop these capacities to their fullest potential, to use them for good rather than distort them or allow them to atrophy. This strikes me as a bit of a paradox, but a beautiful paradox nonetheless. This is where I believe sport can be a great help to us. While I highly recommend the CTP, and if you haven't signed up yet, I hope that you will today after hearing this talk, it's just one of the many ways that we encounter human dignity. Dignity doesn't just manifest itself on the pages of the CTP manual. It exists in real people in their daily work and interactions. In theory, we can see it wherever we look and live it in everything we do. Sometimes we need a little extra help though, and in my opinion, sport can be a great help to us, both in better understanding these manifestations of dignity, and also in learning to acknowledge and manifest our own dignity. Sport is a fascinating phenomenon. Athletes strive to be the best version of themselves. They compete not just for a medal or a trophy, but to know that they have pushed the bounds of their own ability, and maybe even of the human race. Skiers, skaters, horseback riders, basketball players, runners, gymnasts, all these and more train their bodies to perform incredible athletic feats. It's nearly impossible to go through your life without being touched by sport in some way. You may participate recreationally or professionally. You may sit on the sidelines and cheer your favorite team. So it seems that wherever you turn, sport is there. And this is why I believe that sport can speak to us so powerfully about the dignity of the person. What do I mean by this? Well, for one thing, sport is in itself a manifestation of the dignity of the human person. We speak of culture, and what does the immense popularity of sport all over the world tell us, if not that it's a crucial component of modern cultures everywhere? So often we reserve the title of culture for the fine arts. Music, painting, theater, etc. But why should we stop there? At WYA, we like to say that culture is the expression of a region, society, set of values, and environment. Culture is a manifestation of the human ability to adapt to our surroundings and make from them not only a livable place, but an expression of our spirit. Sport, I'd argue, is as much a reflection of a people's spirit as is music or painting. Sports express joy and frustration, striving and yearning. They offer us distraction from the struggles of life, yet the athlete embraces the struggle inherent in his sport. A nation finds pride in its athletes, and when the athlete stands atop a podium and hears the anthem of his country played, he knows that his striving has on some level expressed the spirit of his homeland. This isn't the only way that sport manifests human dignity, though. This shouldn't surprise us, because just as the human person is inherently integrated, so too are the manifestations of human dignity closely connected to one another. Sport is a component of culture, but it also manifests and trains us in freedom and solidarity. When we talk about freedom, so often we fail to recognize what authentic freedom is. More often than not, we think of freedom as the ability to do whatever we want, or a lack of outside constraints on our will. And this is such a shallow understanding of freedom. Of course, there's a grain of truth in this understanding. As George Weigel so beautifully articulates in his speech, Two Ideas of Freedom, political liberty is a great good, and it requires that the state leave its citizens a certain amount of space to exercise their power to think and choose without interference. But if we stop there and limit our understanding of freedom to simply a lack of interference, all that's left is our own will, without any attention to how that will is directed, or whether it's directed at what's actually good for us and for others. As Weigel puts it, true freedom is freedom for excellence. I want you to think back to that first time that you tried a new sport. I'm guessing it was pretty hard. You had to learn the rules, figure out how to coordinate your movements. If you hadn't exercised in a while, I'm guessing you were pretty exhausted at the end. I know when I first started skating, it was exhilarating, don't get me wrong, but there was so much I couldn't do. I was so limited. Only with lots of hard work and practice was I able to master new skills and attempt the athletic feats I wanted to. I think this experience is so relatable for a lot of people. And you know what? If you've experienced this, then on some level, you already understand what true freedom is. When I first stepped on the ice, was I really free to do whatever I wanted? Sure, there weren't any outside constraints on me. There was nothing external holding me back from launching into a double axel. But my lack of skill, lack of practice, even my lack of understanding of how to execute an element like this, all this meant that I wasn't really free in any meaningful sense of the word. Nor did I suddenly attain this true freedom all at once, as soon as I mastered the next skill. Each new skill or goal was a challenge and tested the limits of my freedom. Counterintuitively, the only way I was able to achieve that next level of freedom was to practice even more, to dedicate even more time and energy to my training. In a lot of ways, to put even more constraints on myself. It was so worth it though. The feeling of freedom of movement, of flying across the ice and executing every step flawlessly, having the confidence in my body to be able to relax and enjoy the experience of performing. What was that if not freedom for excellence? This reality was brought home to me even more clearly this past year, after giving birth to my first child. So what does this have to do with human dignity? After all, when we talk about freedom for excellence, we're usually talking about morality or about choosing the good over the bad. And there isn't a moral value to sport. It's not like being bad at sports makes you a bad person. That's actually lucky for me because I may be an Olympic figure skater, but I'm terrible at pretty much every other sport out there, believe me. So I'd like to remind you of a couple things though. One is that we humans like to learn by analogy. The experiences involved in sport are relatable to most people, and we can use this experience to help us understand what it means to pursue virtue, to choose the good over the bad. But I'd also like to point out that human beings are integrated. We are mind and body and soul. Being a good athlete doesn't automatically make you a good person. But if you pursue a sport in an integrated way, can this pursuit of physical excellence lead you to the pursuit of all-around excellence? I believe it can. I'll talk about this some more later, but for now I'd like to turn our attention to the last manifestation of dignity, solidarity. In the WYA Declaration on Solidarity, we affirm that solidarity is the unified commitment of persons to live and work in the truth of who we are and for the pursuit of the common good. At their best, team sports are a beautiful illustration of this idea. If one player on the team skips practices or wants all the glory for himself and just plays like he was the only one on the team, the chances of winning diminish drastically. The world of sport is set up in a way that actually rewards solidarity. Even looking beyond the confines of a single team, the wider athletic community often has a sense of solidarity. We're coming up on the Summer Olympics later this month. Athletes from all over the world will come together in hopefully friendly rivalry to pursue athletic excellence. Athletes join in solidarity from others from their own country to represent their homeland on a national team. And even across nations, there's a sense of solidarity as these athletes share the identity of Olympians. To be fair, I'm using solidarity a bit loosely here. The WYA Declaration goes on to say that solidarity begins with the fundamental recognition of and a common understanding of the human person. I know for a fact that not all athletes, not even all Olympians, share a common understanding of the human person. Again, though, we can learn by analogy. If athletic excellence is the goal of sports, we can talk about a kind of common good or solidarity to be found in that shared pursuit, and we can use that experience to help us think more deeply about true solidarity in a society. Again, I'll go a step further though, and suggest that sport has the potential to train us in authentic solidarity if we pursue our sport as part of integral human development. Okay, so at this point, let's take a step back, and thanks for sticking with me this whole time. I know it's a lot. I mentioned that I think sport has the potential to help athletes actually develop their capacities for freedom and solidarity. I mentioned a caveat though, if pursued a certain way. Let's talk about that. The whole time I've been talking, I wonder if you've been thinking, this sounds too good to be true. Well, Well, if you have, you're right. I've been talking about all the ways that sport manifests human dignity and trains us to recognize and respect it. All of that is true, and I do believe that sport is remarkable for being so well suited to this. It has the power to change the way we live for the better. But it also has the power to change it for the worse and to fail. I think immediately of the 1936 Olympics. You may not know this, but Nazi Germany actually hosted the 1936 Olympics just a few years before the outbreak of World War II, and used the occasion to glorify the regime and promote Nazi ideology. This is one of the most obvious examples of sport being used to undermine human dignity. But I can think of a million other smaller ways that this has happened, and that athletes even have sometimes failed to fully embrace their dignity or that of others. There is something essentially human about sport. I'm not entirely sure what, to be honest, but isn't it so remarkable that sports have developed throughout history in different times, places, and cultures? It seems to point to something universal about the human experience. And I know something else about the human experience, that it's full of struggle and care, as Charles Malik put it. We make mistakes, we fail miserably sometimes, but we also succeed in so many incredible ways. We are capable of great evil, but also of great good. So why should we be surprised if sport has a similar potential for good or for bad? If you've read the WYA Charter, you might have noticed an interesting phrase: integral human development. The Charter goes on to explain that this development is characterized by physical, spiritual, mental, and emotional growth. When we think of development, we often think on a grand scale of developing countries or international development aid. But integral human development applies just as much to the individual as to a nation or a society. After all, a society can't flourish if the individuals in it aren't flourishing. True personal development needs to integrate all the aspects of the human person. I think this is such a helpful framework for understanding how sport can uphold human dignity and how it can also fall short. Despite the appearances, sport is not a purely physical endeavor. I talked before about the distinctively human nature of sport, and if human beings are more than just physical, so is sport. It requires the use of the intellect, not in an abstract way, but in a very practical, action-oriented way. It requires that we train our emotions to support our athletic performance. And remember what I said earlier about sport training athletes in freedom and solidarity? That's part of integral human development too. But as I said before, this only works if athletes pursue their sport in an integrated way, and if sport is used at the service of the whole person, not just one isolated component of the person. For example, practicing sports can be a great way of training yourself to eat well, to wake up early, to discipline your body and get healthy. These are examples of developing our physical bodies, but as part of our overall health and well-being. How many times do athletes fail to do this though? And often through little or no fault of their own, but because coaches or the athletic culture in general are pushing them to see themselves as purely physical beings, to idolize physical excellence to the detriment of the whole person. How many athletes struggle with eating disorders or poor body image? I never struggled with an eating disorder, but I know firsthand how debilitating the pressure to look a certain way can be. And I still find it difficult to remember that I'm not just a number on the scale or a certain body type. In my opinion, there's far too little education on the importance of injury prevention and the long-term consequences of the health issues that athletes are often prone to. I was blessed in that my parents always insisted I put my long-term health first. I think women are particularly disadvantaged in this area. Little attention is paid to the hormone imbalances that can result from high-intensity training, and these can have serious long-term effects on women's reproductive and overall health. I think one of the most extreme and the most heartbreaking ways that sport has failed to uphold human dignity is when it comes to pregnancy and motherhood. There are so many cases of female athletes becoming pregnant and feeling that they have no choice but abortion in order to save their careers or continue performing at a high level. All these failures can be attributed in one way or another to a failure, whether on the part of coaches, sports officials, athletes, or whoever, to make sure that sports are enhancing the dignity of the human person. These failures don't mean that we should give up on sport as a vehicle for development. It just means that when we engage in sports as athletes, spectators, referees, whatever it is, we need to be mindful of our responsibility to uphold human dignity, and we need to be purposeful about harnessing the power of sport for integral human development. I worked with many coaches, trainers, partners, and officials over the years, and some of them clearly valued my performance above my overall well-being. They treated me as an object, not a subject, and reduced me to my physical abilities, if even that. But there were others who respected me as a person, who strove to uphold my dignity and help me to flourish as an athlete and as an all-around person. And you know what? Ironically, it was the people who saw me as more than just my athletic ability who really allowed me to perform at my best and become the best athlete I could be. Because of these people, being an athlete was an overwhelmingly positive experience for me. And I truly believe that I would not be the person I am today without that experience. From my sport, I learned discipline, courage, perseverance, and how to desire and attain excellence. I learned about the power of beauty to transform the world. I learned to see myself as a fully integrated human person, one who at times struggles to live this reality, but one who is constantly striving. I learned about human dignity and its manifestations in freedom, solidarity, and culture. I want every athlete, from the kid picking up the soccer ball for the first time, to the high school football player, to the Olympic gymnast, to have this experience, and we can all play a part in that. Yes, coaches or trainers have an important responsibility, but it's also the friends and especially the family that can help use sport as a vehicle for integral human development. For me, one of the single greatest factors in my success as an athlete was the support of my family. And not just their support of my athletic endeavors, but their support of me as a person in my physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual dimensions. Without their help, I doubt I would have come out of my athletic career with such a positive outlook. Honestly, I probably would have believed the lies that I was nothing more than a number on a scale, that a bad practice or bad performance diminished my value. I can't stress enough how important it is that we all be there for our family members, whether that's in the realm of sports or in other areas of life. Family really is the fundamental unit of society, as we like to say at WYA, where solidarity is learned and practiced. Whoever you are, whether you're an avid athlete or just a casual observer, sport has something to teach you about human dignity. So next time you play a soccer game, run a race, or even watch the Olympics this month, ask yourself, how do I see dignity in action here? And more importantly, how can I put that dignity into action in my own life?
All right, so what are we waiting for? Let's go put dignity into action.
Thank you.